this is Debbie from Lime Diddy Design, and today I'm delighted to be taking a look at the Paper Rose STAMPtember exclusive for I'm So Stamp. The Paper Rose STAMPtember collaboration set is entitled Poinsettia Border and has a lovely large holiday floral border image along with a couple of script sentiments and a bunch of coordinating greetings. I do so love to watercolour, but I recently watercoloured a poinsettia for the Gina K STAMPtember exclusive, and so I thought I'd mix it up today and pull out my coloured pencils. I feel this image particularly suits coloured pencils as there is room enough within the petals and leaves to add highlights and shading, and yet the design is nice and simple, making it easy to get nice definition with the pencils. When I colour with pencils, I particularly like to use toned grey paper from Strathmore. It's a lovely neutral which really allows for the pencil's colours to pop off the surface, and also that surface is smooth, which is great for pencils too. I cut a piece of paper larger than I intended using, roughly 6 inches by 4 3/4 inches, to allow me to trim the panel down later to fit a card base. I aligned the poinsettia border image in the MISTI and stamped in clear embossing ink. This is a sticky ink which leaves a tone-on-tone impression, which is perfect for colouring to give a no-line look. The ink gives enough of an impression to guide the colouring, but will disappear as the pencil is added. I chose a few pencils to work with, a white, light pink, red, deeper red and black for the petals, and then I used the white again along with a light and darker green for the leaves. I also have a yellow for the centre of the flowers and a cream and brown, although I didn't end up using the cream. With an image such as this, there is a lot of repetition in the colouring process. Once you've worked out how to colour one petal or leaf, then the rest is just a repeat of that. So rather than include all the footage but have to speed it up to fit into a decent length of video, instead I'll include a few of the elements but at real-time speed. For reference, in total, which included rummaging around for what pattern paper I wanted to pair with the image, etc., in total this card took me 2 hours to make. When colouring any image, I like to think first about the highlights and shadows. Being deeper in colour, the shadows are easy to add at the end. You can just keep adding deeper and darker colours. However, with highlights, it's all too easy to lose the highlights as you add colour, and it's very difficult to bring those back once you've lost them. And so I like to start colouring with pencils by marking out the highlights and then bringing in the other colours. For this, I use the white pencil, which I need to get a new one as it's getting really short now. Without doubt, the white pencil is the one I use the most of. So having got the highlight areas blocked in with the white pencil, I then work my way through the lightest shade to the darkest and back again. So starting with the light pink and laying down colour with gentle pressure of the pencil, then coming in with the red, followed by the deeper red. To get the really deep shadows where the petals meet the centre of the flower, for there I added a little black, then I worked my way back through the colours, dark red, red, light pink, white, all the time building the colours and keeping in mind the shadows and highlights to bring the impression of dimension. As you colour with pencils, you get little bits of pencil dust gathering, and the easiest way to get rid of these and to keep your project clean is with a soft brush, such as a Perfect Pearls brush from Ranger. I use that regularly during the colouring process to sweep away any excess pencil particles. And one other thing I do regularly while colouring is to sharpen my pencils. I'd colour 2 or 3 petals and then sharpen all the leads before continuing. Having a sharp pencil means that when you go in and add shadows or an outline of shape, then you're going to get a nice clean line when doing so. I go backwards and forwards with my colours, slowly increasing the areas of the shadows and blending in the areas of highlights until eventually I'm happy. If you are unsure where to add shadows and highlights, then your best bet is to do a Google image search for the flower. When I did so for poinsettias, my screen was filled with a wide range of images to look at, and in looking at how the flowers and leaves grow, I noticed that the veins of the petals and leaves are normally deeper set and so in shadow. However, with some plants the veins stick out more and catch the light, and therefore those veins would be lighter than their surroundings. But on poinsettias, the body of the petals swells from the veins, and so it is the body which catches the light, and the veins are deeper in colour and more shadowed. So with my colouring, I used them with the deeper reds along the line of the vein. It's a small detail, but I think the closer to reality the colouring is, the more the viewer connects with the image. So with one part of the petal coloured in real time and one sped up slightly, I then repeated the process for all the other petals. Now I'm adding a pop of yellow to the centre of the flower. I'm outlining each of the circles within the centre with yellow, then adding a touch of white to the centre of a few of the circles. To add more definition, I then added a fine line of brown around the base of the circles, which helps the yellow stand out. I repeated the colouring process for the two smaller poinsettias on either side of the focal flower. The only thing to think about here is that the images are smaller, therefore you won't be able to get as much variation in the shadows and highlights in the reduced space. And because the flowers are drawn as being set back from the focal flower, they would naturally be in more shade, and so I kept the highlights smaller and used more shadow colours. Moving on to the leaves, and I blocked out a few highlights in white. The leaves of the mistletoe are relatively small and skinny, and so I kept the highlights small too. I used the same method of colouring the leaves as I did for the petals. I just mixed up the colours. So starting with a light green and then adding depth with darker green, and finally some deeper shadows in brown, which extend from the stem of the mistletoe. Again, I go backwards and forwards through the colours until I'm happy with the shading and blending of the colours. Really, this is my method for any kind of colouring, be it pencils or watercolour or Copic marker. Start light and slowly add in more depth. It is easier to add depth and colour than it ever is to take it away. For the berries, I coloured those in white with a brown tip and lightly outlined them in brown for more definition. I then repeated the process for the remaining leaves and berries. Finally, I went round the whole of the image with a grey pencil to add a touch of shading and really make the focal point pop from the background. The Poinsettia border set has lots of sentiments to choose from, 2 script sentiments and then a bunch of coordinating ones too. I chose the merry and bright greeting and was undecided whether to have the sentiment above the focal point or below it. Eventually I decided to keep the image the way I had coloured it and have the sentiment above. I placed the greeting in the MISTI and treated the paper with an embossing buddy before I stamped the greeting in clear embossing ink. This is a sticky ink which stays wet for a while and gives you enough time to sprinkle on top an embossing powder, which then sticks to the ink. I then melted the embossing powder with a preheated heat tool. Having the heat tool already hot means the embossing powder melts quickly and there's less chance of the paper warping. I added a striped pattern paper to a white card base, leaving a small white border showing at the top and bottom. I then trimmed the coloured piece and added a strip of polka dot pattern paper to the lower edge. I added foam adhesive to the back and then adhered the panel over the striped paper. At this point I decided to make the highlights on the berries and centre of the poinsettia brighter by adding a touch of white gouache with a paintbrush. It's difficult to see the difference this makes on camera, but in real life those white highlights really pop. Finally, I decided to add one of the coordinating greetings from the set. I stamped the sentiment in clear embossing ink on black card and sprinkled with white embossing powder before heat setting. I then trimmed the piece to a skinny banner and used Gina Cake net glue to adhere it to the card. On the Simon Says Stamp blog, you will find more details of this Poinsettia border Paper Rose STAMPtember exclusive. If you want to find me, I blog over at limedudedesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.